Hello, my name is Elton and welcome back to my channel, and this is my cat Elvira. Currently she is sitting on my shoulder and we're going to see how long that lasts. Not at all. Remember, introduce yourselves down below, comment your name, pronouns. The question of today is, if you could be any mythological creature, what would you be and why? My answer, if you all are wondering, would be a dragon, because I'm gay. I don't know how many of you guys are aware, but Fashion Week has started up again, and that's a lot more popular in like the mainstream fashion community. I know we talk a lot more about alternative fashion and like subcultures over here. However, Fashion Week, as well as fashion brands and looking at luxury fashion brands, is one of those things that's still very important to any community that has involvement with fashion. If the Devil Wears Prada can tell us anything, it's that no matter how removed that you think you are from the fashion community, you are not. And that includes subcultures and alternative fashion as well, because alternative is entirely dependent on what is mainstream. We can go very much in detail for that if you guys are interested. I would love to talk more about that, but right now we're talking about Fashion Week. We're not going to talk about who showed at Fashion Week or why that matters or what this brand story is. We're essentially going to do an introduction for all of those who aren't necessarily familiar with terminology of the fashion of the mainstream fashion community, in case you're thinking that you're a little bit lost. In that case, hi, my name is Elton and my qualifications are autism. So we're talking about the what, how, why, where, who, and why it matters. So Fashion Week is a week where brands and designers show off the next year's collections. So usually it starts in February, they'll do the fall winter collection, and in September they'll do the spring summer collection of the next year. February is fall winter 2022, that's happened earlier this year, and currently what is going on is spring summer 2023. The way that they do that is to get ahead of the curve. I'll go a little bit more in depth in there, but essentially just fashion shows, what's going to be happening. That is also how a lot of people figure out what's going to be trending before the season even starts, is because of these shows. Each major city tends to have a week that's devoted to fashion, especially if you go over to Tokyo or to a lot of the cities in Europe. They'll have their own individual fashion weeks. However, there are only 4 cities that are involved in Fashion Week TM copyrighted. So these 4 cities are New York, London, Milan, and Paris. So the USA, the UK, Italy, and France. Now, the reason that they picked these cities is for a couple of reasons, and a lot of fashion houses started in Europe, specifically France and Italy. Having a fashion week in there pays homage to the earlier designers that started there, especially a lot of your older brands like Louis Vuitton, Prada, Balenciaga, Versace, but they come from these countries. London is a major fashion city in the West, as it has a lot of designers, as a lot of movements came out of London. Specifically, my favorite designer, Vivienne Westwood, is a London designer. She was there for around the time of the 80s punk movement that influenced a lot of American punk. While New York isn't technically an old Western city of fashion, it has more elitism to it than a place like LA or any place in California, where you might think that the fashion capitals. A lot of old rich people are in New York, as opposed to LA, which tends to have a lot more new money and influencer type people. LA may be a fashion capital of the world, but it tends to be more young and more, not necessarily indie, but influencer and trendy fashion capital. Then for New York has a little bit more prestige and a little bit more history, but that just has a lot more to do with elitism and East Coast versus West Coast dynamics and a whole political fuckery. Not only do all of these 4 cities come from a different history of fashion, different brands that came out of those cities, they also come with their own aesthetics for each week. So Fashion Week always tends to start out with New York. New York tends to have a lot more new designers, upcoming designers with a variety of different backgrounds and histories and what they're making, what they're creating, what their aesthetic is, as well as New York tends to have a lot of the street style and a lot of influencers going. So a part of New York Fashion Week is not just attending the fashion shows themselves, but seeing the people in the streets. What are they wearing? Who are they wearing? There's lots of press around it, talking to people, as well as the designers are a lot more accessible because they're newer, they're younger, they don't have a lot of history, which means that they are a lot more easy for press and interviewers as well as journalists and stuff to get access to these new designers, to talk to them and ask them about why they do this, why their stories, be able to get behind the scenes looks at everything, because they're more willing and open, because this is how they get press. This is by talking to people. New York has a variety of different styles on display, a lot of ready to wear, as well as something very similar to ACOTAR. ACOTAR? No, that's a book series. Hold on. I can never actually be a proper fashion influencer, because if I fucking go up there and be like, I couture fashion, they're gonna laugh at me. Anyways, back to what we were saying. Haute couture fashion. That is a like specifically like French label. There's only like 10 fashion houses in like the entire world that are actually able to use that haute couture label. But the design process of like the aesthetics of haute couture can be seen in just every single fashion show for a variety of different brands, because haute couture, because like the technical definition of it is like it's expensive and fashionable, but like that's all luxury fashion. But how I view it as, it's more specifically like the handmade stuff, like anything with like really intricate beadwork and like patterning and seaming, like that is haute couture. London comes after New York. So London is known for having, again, another focus, a lot of new designers, a lot of up and coming designers, but it tends to be more experimental. And experimental, and especially when it comes to fashion, has a lot to do with like mixing not only fashion, but like different forms of art, as well as design, the production, the performance value of it. It's taking what is already there and looking at it and be like, not necessarily how can I make this new or better, but how can I make this unique specifically. So it's creating uniqueness from what has already been done, instead of trying to be original, because originality is dead. So Milan is after London. Milan and Paris tend to have a lot of very similar vibes. A lot of the older fashion brands, Milan tends to have a lot more focus on like those Italian brands, like your Versace, your Gucci, etc. They're a little bit more willing to just throw shit out the wall and see what sticks. They tend to be a lot more willing to be very outlandish, be very absurd, be willing to just be weird as shit, because fashion is weird. Because what it's essentially doing is taking something very simple and making it very complicated, and then mixing it all with fucking capitalism soup, and then pouring judgment on top of it, and then making it really fucking expensive. Or, on the other hand, exploiting a shit ton of people because of that capitalism soup to make shit really cheap. Then, once that's all done, then you put on top of the culture of judging people and viewing people differently based on what they wear. Sometimes it's weird, and you can just do weird shit with that, because what's gonna happen, huh? Nobody's gonna buy it? Baby, that's the most of the point of fashion shows. Half the shit they show in there, nobody's gonna fucking buy. Except for me. If I had billions upon billions of dollars to spend on fashion, I would probably buy the weirdest shit imaginable. And then wear it casually. You get this fucking gorgeous, like, sculpted piece of fabric and, like, wire and shit and gold and jewels, and then it looks like fucking clouds just lifting out of your tits. And then you just wear it to, like, fucking Olive Garden. This is why I should not be allowed to have millions of dollars, because I'll just start doing bullshit. Paris is next. There's a lot to say about Paris Fashion Week, because there's a lot to say about Paris fashion culture and its personality, and not at all a little bit mean. Paris is left for last, because it's like kind of a best kind of thing. Like, if you get into like not just Fashion Week but Paris Fashion Week, it's one of those things where like you fucking made it. There's like the official Paris Fashion Week lineup, and then a lot of designers will have their own fashion shows during Paris Fashion Week, while not a part of it, because more people are likely to attend. You're always going to see like your Louis Vuitton, your Balenciaga, etc., like people that have been in the game for ages. Now that we know of where and what, we are now going to talk about why. Why the fuck would you do this? Why do fashion shows even exist? We can go very in-depth into these, but we're going to try to do this very quickly and very succinctly. First of all, a lot of people, reason why that brands and houses and designers will do fashion shows is because of marketing. Fashion shows are done for a variety of different reasons, and a lot of those have to deal with showing the way that the clothes move on a person, and not just like a mannequin, aka the design, the aesthetic of your brand, how you want to be perceived and who you want your customers to be, as well as the story of brand, who you are, what you want to say with this collection, as well as what the brand is actually offering. Like, what clothes are you selling? So design includes all of like the nitty-gritty details of the garment, the way it moves on the body, what fabric it's made out of, what fabrics do you want it to be made of, like the stitching, the detailing, the way that the different details are put onto the garment and where they're put at, the cut of it, the flow of it, who you have in it. The aesthetic is also it comes after the design. Who do you want your customers to be? Where will your clothes be seen? Why do you want them to wear the clothes that they do? So that gets into a lot of like, how inclusive is your modeling range? Are they all like the same person copied a million different times? Or do you have a variety of like sizes and colors and weights and heights, all things like that? That influences the aesthetic of your brand. But especially like two things that I find are very interesting comparison aesthetics are like Vivienne Westwood and Chanel, especially since Vivienne Westwood tends to be a lot more eccentric, and Chanel has relations to Coco Chanel. And Coco Chanel famously had a quote about like, the first thing you should do is take an accessory off of you before you leave the door. I don't fucking remember it. Why? Because I don't like Coco Chanel. Those two brands, Vivienne Westwood and Chanel, both have two very different customer base. They have two very different aesthetics. They have two very different brand goals. So while you might have a couple of customer overlap, usually someone who is like a diehard Vivienne Westwood fan would not necessarily be a diehard Chanel fan. And the goal of you as a brand in this fashion show is to present that aesthetic so that your customer base can find you. So the story of the brand tends to fall into two categories. One is the history of the brand, like where they came from, what have they done already, are they reflecting back on their vintage pieces, who do they have in their who is their creative director right now, who was their creative director, like that all is the story of the brand, the history of the brand. The story of the collection is not necessarily something that every single designer does, but a lot of designers like to have a theme with their collection. The other purpose of a fashion show is what is ready to be worn, aka ready to wear items, and that things that buyers and like individual people can purchase and be worn. While you get into like your more avant-garde and extravagant and like haute couture, like dresses and outfits, those tend to be for like very specific events or not to be worn at all. But that is what the brand is actually selling, the ready to wear. So who the fuck even goes to any of these things? Very obviously, editors, journalists, writers, bloggers, etc. People who need, like, whose whole business relies on, like, getting the inside scoop of, like, what's going on in Fashion Week. That way you can produce the articles, that way people can make the trend videos, etc., etc., etc. Like, you need to be there to get the knowledge. That way you can post those articles as soon as possible. That way you're not behind. Especially in the fashion industry, with how quickly the fashion trends are moving, you want to be on top of everything. Another group of people that will be there are buyers. Buyers are a very specific group of people, and it's also terminology that's going to be very often used in the fashion space. They are the people that buy the clothes so that you can buy them. So they're the people that are so they are hired by like tail stores to buy the clothes from the brands so that you can buy them next season. And that's why the fashion shows are so far in advance. That way the buyers can be like, hey, I want this amount of product, and this amount of product, and the brand can put that into production, sell it to the buyers can put it in the store. The buy is what the stock that has been bought. So that's like what you see in the retail stores. So if anyone says, oh, the buy was really bad, or I didn't really like the buy this season, that is what they're talking about. Like not necessarily the trends, but the actual stock of clothing that is available to purchase from retail stores, and not just from the brand itself. Celebrities are another group of people that are often found at fashion week and fashion shows, and that is, again, kind of obvious. If you are personally a fashion designer, you want celebrities to be wearing your clothes because people will report on it, people will want to wear it. However, once we get into celebrity culture, then it comes into the certain way that celebrities and influencers and content creators interact with this fashion space, because the fashion sphere tends to be very elitist. They tend to be very high class. They don't like new people, and they don't like people that they didn't pick. However, influencers and content creators of certain sides tend to also be the reason why brands will get big, especially new brands and new designers, or why trends happen. Because, like, Kim Kardashian can wear a dress, but not a lot of people are just going to be foaming at the mouth to get that dress. because usually it's very expensive, or it's custom made, or it's just not possible to buy. However, if Emma Chamberlain wears a dress, that is the hot item. And that has a lot to do with how influencers versus celebrities interact with their audience. People trust Emma more about certain clothing items than they trust celebrities. With the influencers, content creators, there's this veil of disguise of that individual person picked it because they liked it. Whereas with celebrities, it tends to be more of a stylist. Even if the content creator and the influencer have a stylist that picked out for them, it's the parasocial relationship dynamics that play out with it, because you know this person. So influencers have become a very big part of fashion weekends, fashion spaces, especially over the past couple years because of TikTok causing the growth of a lot of fashion influencers to just absolutely blow up. It's very good, especially for new brands and new designers, is to work more specifically with influencers and content creators over celebrities. Because one of the things that recently happened is Dylan Mulvaney, where she did the 100 Days of Girlhood, essentially just her transition into being the woman that she is. The very notable things about her was her fashion sense, like what she wore and what she liked, and like how distinct her fashion style was. So it was no surprise that she actually like walked the runway for one of these designers. And I have never heard of Jessica Jade before. I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily like constantly up to date of like who the new big person is. And I'm assuming there's a lot of people like me, especially a lot of people who are not necessarily into fashion. And now that Peace Brother are posting this TikTok of her walking the runway and getting very excited, now there are more eyes on that Jessica Jade dress and Jessica Jade's brand as a whole, thus giving her more attention than she would have like any other celebrity. Because while it may have reached the celebrity's audience or our like the fashion audience, Dylan Mulvaney wearing a Jessica Jade dress reaches an entirely different audience that would not have known about Jessica Jade previously. And that is one of the good things about working with influencers and like content creators and people who are in those space, is that their fans and their audience will hype shit up, not only because the design is really cool, the brand is very cool, but because they want to support their person, the non-monetary transactional relationship. It's absolutely fascinating. I fucking love like looking into influencer culture and looking influencer marketing and stuff. It's absolutely fascinating. So I hope this video was very informative, especially coming into the next couple of fashion weeks. If you have any questions, feel free to comment them down below. I'll be happy to answer them to the best of my ability. So next week I'll be customizing you guys how to customize like hoodies and sweatshirts and such. We thank you all for coming. I very much appreciate it, and I will see you guys all later. Bye.